welcome to the Dogish podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the dog parents and topics, events, and personalities impacting their lives. My name is Jasen Arias, founder of Forever USA, photography experience for you and the dog who stole your heart. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Miss Sylvia Wess, trainer extraordinaire and owner of Dog Up in This Bitch. How are you today? Man, if I might need to like improve my timing on that, because it almost came off like, bitch, how are you today? But that's not, it was owner of Dog Up in This Bitch. And how are you today?
Yeah, I think like a slight pause, because our listeners might be like, damn, they are comfortable.
Right.
I am floored about today's guest.
I've been
That's how I am
about this. Like, I am so excited.
You've been talking about it, and I have not. You did not amply prepare me for the amount of excitement that I should be experiencing. We talked to Lori Kalef.
Yes.
Who is the program director at SPCAI and
SPCAI.
Yeah. This is how excited I am.
Well, we'll be
I'm like fumbling over my words.
Like
it's
the connections
crazy.
and all of that kind of stuff. But you're not going to want to.
She's my spirit animal. Everyone
of this show. It's incredible. Let's get to it. Yeah. Hello, Lori. How are you today?
Hi, Jasen. I'm great. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I am elated to introduce you to my co-host, Sylvia.
Gosh.
I think you guys already are kicking it off great. And
yeah, Jasen, actually, I think we've got it from here. If you just wanted to,
would not be the first
take
time.
Lunch.
I love the preamble before we actually started recording.
Yeah.
I feel like I've known Sylvia for about 20 years already.
It probably.
So awesome I'm super excited to have Lori on the show. You're with the SPCA International, and we got to work with you guys, and it's been over a year now when we did that. What was it? My Next Bowl. I think that was the program.
Yeah.
It was called, right? And when we got to kind of launch into that project with you, for me, it was. Again, this might just be classic American. We get or just classic person. We get so wrapped up into our own worlds. And I had like this idea of what animal welfare was like. And it never really crossed my mind of what was going on around the world for animal welfare and what rescues look like. And I remember you would mention like, hey, we just opened up our first rescue in Iraq. And that was just that one phrase alone was like, it opened up a whole new world. So getting to have you on the show and being able to talk about some of the stuff and then compounding it with what's going on with COVID around the world, I'm just like, I kind of just want to be quiet and just send you off.
Oh, well, put a placeholder on that Iraq, because once some of the restrictions lift, we'll get you on a mission with us to Iraq.
Love that.
Wait. What's happening? Wow. Should I take lunch? No. All right. So I had a question that I'm sure many of our listeners will have, because I'm very familiar with like obviously the SPCA, but don't know the difference between the SPCA and SPCAI. So can you break that down?
Yeah, thank you. So we do get mistaken for being affiliated with all the SPCAs around the world, both in Canada and the US. But what it is basically is an acronym that anybody could own. So we're not affiliated with any other SPCAs. And just in case, I get this question quite often, what does SPCA stand for? It's Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And so we are just international. So we don't have shelters like most SPCAs have. We're completely program-based, and we run campaigns all around the world by building partnerships. So one of what Jasen and I were working on, I can't believe it's been a year, by the way.
I think it's been more than a year. Yeah.
Nuts.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but we could just like not count last year, so it's only been like a few months.
Right.
None of us have gotten older.
I haven't.
Shirts haven't gotten tighter.
Mine have always been this tight.
I just, I look to see if I put them in the dryer or not. Anyway, I'm digressing. So we build
I blame my husband. I'm like, honey, did you put this one in the dryer? Because I told you it's hang dry only. He's like, no, babe, I've stopped putting all your shirts in the dryer.
I look to see the material to see if they shrink just by hanging them after they're washed. And I think most do anyway. Anyway, it's
so back to the
Right.
difference between
right, animal welfare.
We've digressed and we're back. Animal welfare, prevention of cruelty, international. So you're setting up programs all over the world then.
Yeah, so we have 4 main programs. The program that Jasen and I were working on back a year ago for My Next Bowl was through our Shelter Support Fund program. And that is a program where we help smaller organizations and shelters all around the world. I think we're in about close to 80 countries now.
Wow.
We help with funding, we help with supplies, we help with humane education, we help with legislation, disaster relief when it's needed. And of course, our main focus and mandate is spay and neuter, because without spay and neuter, we're not doing our job. So in order for there not to be any cruelty, neglect, starvation, disease, it's to control the animal population. So that's our biggest mandate. And what we do is we're actually quite a small team. We're based in New York City, but what our job is and what our focus is to build partnerships around the world so that we can get the work done. And a lot of these partnerships we work with side by side when we can. Pre-COVID times, we were, on an airplane probably every 6 to 8 weeks to places like Iraq, places where I don't usually tell my family about until I come home.
Until you get back.
You're like, I'm just going to someplace.
Well, the worst part is when we go to a country that we have to change our SIM cards and we don't have the same phone number. So at night, I make sure that the time that my parents are not going to be watching this, right?
I don't know.
Only if you tell them about it.
I have to switch the SIM card once I'm on Wi-Fi just to say, oh, hi. Yeah, just a big, long day. Sorry to get back to you now.
Everything's fine. I'm in Florida.
Yeah.
I feel a break coming up, but I'm fascinated. Like my first question would be, has there been anything that has been scary on these trips? Like, do we have time to answer that, Sylvia, or do we need to take a quick break? You do have time to answer.
We're back. So Lori, share with us one of your, maybe like the top most, and then maybe like the second most, maybe the third too, however you feel like sharing.
Sure. So I think that most people, when they hear places like Middle East, like Lebanon and Iraq, they think of what they see that's sensationalized through the media, right?
Right.
They think about tanks driving down the streets and people, just always in hiding, or, they think of like war. And of course, these are war-torn areas of the world that we are visiting. But our biggest job is to make sure that when we visit these places, we make sure that our team is safe. We work with security teams on the ground. And so we're not going to do anything that will put anybody's life at risk. And again, this goes back to building the partnerships that we need. So I'm just going to I have a lot of drop-down menus when I speak.
Perfect.
So one of the programs that we run, that we travel to the Middle East for mainly, is called Operation Baghdad Pups worldwide. And we rescue and reunite dogs and cats befriended by US service members who are deployed to these challenging areas of the world. And so there's a lot of places that we can't go as North Americans. So we are part of our plan is, these missions take a few months to plan because we have to find the right security teams. We have to find the right members on the ground who have the authorization to go into some of these areas, like the bases. Like, we do a lot of rescue from Syria, but we can't go into Syria, but we have drivers and security teams and the military who are able to do that for us. So back to your original question. I think that, my first trip to Iraq was a little bit, in the back of my mind. I'm like, what am I doing? Where am I going?
Sure.
But
I can imagine.
arriving into where we have our main operations, which is in Kurdistan, I have never been greeted by such open arms and such beautiful, beautiful people. I felt so comfortable and so safe there. And, so that quickly, once you visit the area, that the fear dissipates. But another trip that we took, I think that was probably even, a little bit more frightening, was Chernobyl. We worked in Chernobyl.
Whoa.
We usually get that response.
That one I'm not interested in going on.
Oh no, they're doing like full-blown tours there now. I've watched all the documentaries on Chernobyl and the stuff that's going there, the people that still live inside Chernobyl, and like it's a fascinating area.
Wow. So you went to Chernobyl to rescue dogs. Who are you? Sorry. Can we be friends forever? Like,
Absolutely.
gosh, I want to be a fly like on the wall of every mission you're on, but okay. So you're in Chernobyl.
Thank you. I think I wake up every single day since I've been working with SPCA International thinking, I can't believe I get to do what I get to do. We can go back to that in later on if you'd like to know how that started too.
Absolutely.
But with Chernobyl, obviously it's the most radiated place in the world still, about 36 years after the disaster. So when we got an email asking us if we can help with a large-scale spay and neuter program for there was at this time about 1,000 dogs and cats, descendants from the dogs and cats left behind after the disaster.
Wow.
We thought, wow, this is unheard of. We couldn't believe that this was happening. And I don't think that a lot of people knew that there were actually still animals living in the area. So there's a lot of obviously precautions that you have to take when you're entering into such a highly radiated zone, covering your arms with long sleeves, wearing the right shoes. We have dosimeters that measure our radiation levels. At the end of the day, you are actually exposed to more radiation if you're flying like we do. So we were safe all the time. None of us were ever exposed to high doses of radiation. But there was that fear entering into Chernobyl. You hear about it on the news, you hear the stories, you read the articles, and I have to say it's one of the most humbling places I've ever visited in my entire life. It's almost apocalyptic. You can walk through the areas in the 30-kilometer zone, and you can walk through people's homes, and the tables are still set for dinner. And you go through the libraries, and the books, I don't know how they've managed to survive, are still there. Newspapers are scattered all over the ground from 36 years ago.
Wow.
6 years ago. So yeah, I think that was probably a little bit, because you never know what's going to happen if you get exposed to a high dose of radiation. And we were right under the sarcophagus where the nuclear tower that exploded during the disaster was, but it's covered in lead encasing. But even that lead encasing is only going to last 100 years.
It's failing.
Wow.
Like they're in the midst of rebuilding a new container around all of it and dealing with. No, that whole area is just like, it's incredible. It's interesting on so many levels. But like, so tell us a little bit more about the project. So you guys went there for a spay and neuter of 1,000 cats and dogs. Like, how does that happen? So you guys are working like in the center of where all of this occurred.
And who called you? That's what
So thank you for asking. This goes back to how we do our work. It's with partnerships. So we got a message from a radiation specialist who runs, Lucas Hickson. He runs his own nonprofit organization. They're mitigating. They work primarily in Chernobyl or any zones that have been affected by radiation. And he kept visiting the area, and he was there to help with the people, basically, who are still being affected by the radiation. People, the workers. A lot of people don't know this, that the plant is still in existence, and there are workers there that go in day after day.
Wow.
There are people, like you said, Jasen, who work there, but they can only live on the premises for 3 weeks at a time, rotations. So he kept getting off this train. And the train itself is an experience because we stayed about 45 kilometers outside Chernobyl. They built a new worker town called Slavutich, and that's where all the workers live. And so we would take the train. It would take about 45 minutes, and it feels like this old Soviet Union era train. There's no air conditioning in the summer, and there are no washrooms, and it goes through Belarus, and it's quite phenomenal. And so he kept getting off the train, and he was greeted by all these dogs, and couldn't believe how many dogs were living in that zone. And he thought, well, I need to do something about this. And so he contacted us and a couple of other organizations, and he kind of already had the project configured before we got involved. And so that first year, which is 1997, my goodness, 2017.
A small swing in time.
I was like, whoa.
We visited, and we couldn't believe how incredibly up and running this was already. And because he had already formed all these relationships with the nuclear power plant, he was able to get the supplies in, and the vets who volunteered, all volunteers, of course. And there's a team, I think, the first year of about 45 people, and it was 4 weeks long. And we were only there for about a week. And then we had big discussions afterwards, and then we became the sole partnership with Clean Futures Fund. And so we entered into an agreement for the next 3 years to spay and neuter most of the population. So a successful spay and neuter campaign is penetrating about 80% of the population. And I think we got up to about 83% by the end of it. And so now we're just managing if there are new litters each year.
No, I don't know if this is an uncomfortable question or not, but I'm sure other people are wondering, were all the animals relatively healthy?
Yeah, no, that's not an uncomfortable question. That's the first question we get asked all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we never saw, so when we're talking about health, the worst thing that we would see are viruses or illnesses. And that's just contempt. That's just what happens in a normal population, stray animal population.
And not stray animal population.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things was obviously to make sure that when we're spaying and neutering them, that they're all okay, and that we would vaccinate them, deworm them. And we would also treat them for any injuries. And we would also, in their ear tags, we would put in a tiny little dosimeter to measure their radiation over the years.
Oh, wow.
So fast forward to today, none of them have internal contamination, as far as we know. There's just surface contamination. So part of our job was to take a dosimeter and scan their entire body, and especially their foot pads, because they're walking around all the time. And some of them had high levels. And this is what blew me away the first time, was that soap and water. That's all it took. Just washing it off with soap and water, and then they were okay. They were good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just floored by the whole idea of this, because you don't think of Chernobyl and go, but the animals that are living there, because I don't know, but also why wouldn't there be animals there, but it's just not the first thing that you think of. And then when I do think of like, oh my gosh, there are animals there. Wow. my mind doesn't think like they're totally healthy and walking around and normal and fine. Like that's just not where my mind goes at all. So I am utterly flabbergasted by this information. And we're going to take a quick break.
Sure.
In the break, I'm just reeling. Like my mind is like, how do none of them have cancer? I'm confused.
So
But
when we're talking, I'm curious. Like, are there literally like little corgis and German shepherds, and they've all created their own little commune? Like what kind of dogs and cats are we talking
I need
about?
to know more about this.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. It's one of my favorite projects to talk about because it's just so out of the ordinary. Nobody ever considers that there are animals living there. Sylvia, I know during the break, I think you were talking about like, I can't believe there are animals there. Here's another drop-down menu. They're not just cats and dogs. There's horses. There was a lone fox. His name is Simon. I don't think he's alive. I think he passed away this year. There's a moose and
a singular moose.
Well, that's what we think, living in the Pripyat area, which is the most contaminated.
Wow.
And and insects and birds, and you just don't consider this. But one thing we always joke about, like the mosquitoes there are about this size. They're nuclear.
Oh my God.
You can put on as much repellent as you want, and they will bite you through that.
I mean, at this point, they've survived like a nuclear disaster. I think evolution is in their favor when it comes to DEET, you know?
DEET.
But it's really interesting. I mean, we're talking about, a lot of people ask that question, Jason, like, what do the animals look like? Do they have 5 legs? Are they missing?
Well, I just like when I think of like wild dogs, because I mean, we've transitioned over the last 35 years when the animal population would be continuing to grow. These aren't domesticated dogs anymore. They may have started from being domesticated, but now we have like multiple breeds that would be living in that area. And again, I'm just shooting from the hip. I don't know, but like, is it like, what kind of dogs are living there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there were numerous breeds at the time of the disaster. But now we're talking about like, 10, 12 generations later. And this is what you're asking about, the radiation levels and how the dogs survived.
How they even were able to reproduce. Mm-hmm. I mean,
right. And there's a history, there's photos taken after, the first couple of years of what the dogs looked like, and they were very affected by the radiation, and they were mutated.
Wow.
It's really, they're hard. The photos are hard to look at. There aren't many, but over time, and this is what the beauty of it is that nature kind of rebuilt itself. And we're talking about like the tree, not just the animals.
Yeah, I was thinking like vegetation, because when I think of Chernobyl and I think of like this disaster area, like I just picture this like black and very charred and like kind of untenable earth that like nothing is growing from. So when you're like, there's a moose and a horse running around, I'm like, what are they eating?
Well, unfortunately, some of them are eating each other.
Oh, wow.
The biggest threat for these dogs are the wolves in the surrounding forests. And because the trees and the land has become so lush and there's so much regrowth, the wolves have started to come in closer into the zone. So what do the dogs look like? They look like wolf hybrids. 90% of them. They look like they're mixed with wolves, but friendly. And so the biggest threat again is the predation. And so when the wolves come in and they're hungry and it's winter and the winters are so cold there, right, we've sadly lost a lot of the population. And that's how they're, the survivors stay close to the power plant as possible. And a lot of people ask, what do the dogs eat? And the workers are the ones who feed them.
Wow.
And the workers absolutely love these dogs. You get off the train and you see all the workers like grabbing things from the mess hall and feeding all the dogs and stuff. And but part of what we did actually was to start up a feeding program as well with Clean Futures Fund. So we still fund that program, and there's teams that go in whenever the power plant is open, so 5 days a week, and feed all the dogs. And they live in little communities, little packs.
Like, I want to go. Like, I know it sounds dangerous, but I would hop on and I would join that trip in a heartbeat.
That's incredible. Okay.
Do it.
So now I have to know. Earlier I asked, who are you? But seriously, like, how did you, sorry, I didn't realize you were drinking. How did you, how did this come to you, this job? How did you, Lori, become SPCA International Chernobyl traveler feeder of radioactive dogs? How did this become?
Well, you know what? I didn't even say what I do for the organization. I'm the program director.
So what is the program director?
So I'm in charge of the program operations. So I'll get back to the other programs that we run as well. But we have such an incredible team. And a lot of people say, well, how do you do this? And, you know, how do you know all this? How do you figure it all out? And I don't. It's just because we have such a great team, and we have great partners on the ground to be able to do the work that we do. So how did I get into this? My very first memory, I have this incredible long-term memory. My short-term memory is terrible. Like, I can't remember what I ate for dinner last night, but my long-term memory is very great. And my first memory is of my mother taking me to a department store. I'm from Montreal, Canada. And I remember her taking me there, and she said, you get to pick out a bath toy. And I said, oh, okay. I remember thinking that. I mean, of course, this is like, you know, visualized in my head and probably a little exaggerated. Right. And there was a pink whale bath toy, and it was missing a fin. And that's the one I wanted. And she said, why are you taking that one? It's broken. And I said, it's not broken. It's perfect to me. That's the one I want. And she said, okay. So it started then. And then earlier memories of me, my mother says this, I was walking, I used to crawl across the street before I can even walk. It was the 70s, and the doors were left open, and like, you know, kids were naked, and I would always end up across the street with my neighbor's dog, Casey. And so it began there, but fast forward to when I was about 12 or 13, I was always rescuing like the cats off the street and bringing them home. And my parents are also big animal lovers. And back in the day, there weren't any restrictions to volunteer, no age restrictions to volunteer at shelters. And so a few days after school, my parents would take me to the shelter, and we'd feed all the cats. My dad and I would walk all the dogs that everybody was afraid of walking. And so it just kind of organically rolled out from there, and went away to university thinking I, didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't actually know that I could have a career and live my dharma, my passion for animals. And this could be my everyday life. So
she was born for it, Sylvia. That's what we're hearing. She was born for this.
I mean, I can relate. So I'm just sitting here like, clearly Lori is my spirit animal.
Oh, I love that.
And so then eventually it would have led you to the SPCAI, right?
Yeah. So I, after university, I started working in a veterinary hospital, thought, okay, I'm going to become a veterinarian. Decided I don't want to become a veterinarian.
I thought the same thing. And then I was like, 8 years of school, blah.
Oh my goodness. I cannot stand the sciences. I went back to do chemistry and biology and needed a tutor. And I'm like, this is not for me.
The blood, all of it.
Yeah, that part I don't mind. I can see blood and guts and stuff with animals, feces, urine. People, no. So at the time, the former executive director of the SPCA that I was volunteering at in Montreal, his vision was always to create a program-based organization in the US so that he can help shelters like the one in Montreal all around the world. And so he founded it back in 2006. And, you know, we kept in touch over the years, but it wasn't until I moved out west and left my job at the veterinary hospital that I went to, and tell me if I'm running on.
No, you're great.
You're good.
I had gone on a trip to Florida and found out about the situation where people were dumping their unwanted dogs and cats in the Everglades. And of course we know the alligators and the snakes and everything were eating them up alive. And
oh my God.
I thought, okay, we have to do something about this. And at the time, there was a couple of volunteers going in there every day and rescuing as many as possible.
How dangerous. Wow.
Yeah, very dangerous. And so I had contacted SPCA International at this time. It was back in 2010 or 2011. And they asked me to write a story about it. And I guess they liked the way they liked the way I write. And they asked me if I wanted to volunteer in the Shelter Support Fund grant program, just to write up the grants and research new organizations. So I started off as a volunteer. And then they started slowly getting me into the staff calls. And 6 months later, I was hired as an assistant in programs, and then kind of built my way up from there to manager and director, and here I am. So it was just an organic process from day one.
Super amazing. Cool. All right.
Thank you.
We're gonna take one last break and come back with the amazing Lori Kalef right after this.
Okay, so welcome back. So we just got done hearing the story of your journey to the SPCAI, but you've mentioned that you've got other programs that are going on as well. I mean, we've heard Chernobyl and Iraq, but like, what else are you guys working on right now?
Yeah, so we also run a veterinary supply aid program, and we deliver on a yearly basis about $8 million worth of veterinary supply aid around the globe. And most of these supplies and medications are to support the spay and neuter projects that we're working on as well. So we do that. We build partnerships in areas of the world like Sierra Leone, places like that are, you wouldn't think that you can touch or get to in developing countries mostly. So we have that program. And we also have, as part of a branch of our military program, we have Operation Military Pets. And what we noticed were in shelters surrounding bases around the world were increasing in size and numbers because service members who were PCSing couldn't afford to bring their animals with them because there's such a high cost of transport. People don't realize, they think like, well, why can't you just put that dog on a plane? But it costs thousands and thousands of dollars. So we developed a grant program as well for service members to be able to apply for grants so that they can bring their dog and cat with them.
So they would befriend these animals when they're deployed.
Well, that's the Operation Baghdad Pups worldwide program. This one is more family based, so they're owned pets beforehand. The one that you're speaking of is the ones, like you said, when they're deployed and a dog or cat wanders on base, and there's not a dry eye in the house when I read these applications and when I share it with the team and we see the photos, and these dogs and cats help these service members so much. They give them a piece of home when they're on deployment. A lot of them have come to me and said, this dog saved my life. This cat saved my life. So we never say no. And, there are times when it's the middle of the night and, a bomb just went off near base or something like that. And we have these incredible partners and security teams who risk their lives to be able to go rescue this animal for them, because it's so, so important. Going back to this, where you're asking me what we're working on, and I think that pre-COVID, it was so much simpler to be able to transport the animals to the US. And when everything stopped, back in March, when all the restrictions really started coming into play, we were really stuck. And we had to find such innovative ways to be able to transport the animals to the US without flight volunteers. And in areas of the world where airports were closed down. So we had to transport some to other countries. One of the biggest feats, I think, was hiring an aircraft, a chartered plane from the US to fly into Iraq through Baghdad and entering into skies that were closed and land in Erbil and pick up 47 dogs and cats. And
wow,
it took months and months and months of planning. So
did you guys get media on it? Like, this is what frustrates me about like our news locally. Like, this is an amazing story that's having a huge impact, and it's such a feel good of so many people coming together to do things across the world, and not like a.
I've never heard of this.
Yes.
And I'm very upset.
Well, now you did. Now we'll get it out there.
Now we know. And now all of our listeners know too. My goodness.
But I mean, you guys are doing this, maybe not like super regularly, but I mean, this is your job description. This is what you're out there doing. You're again, we've talked about it so many times, the human animal bond, and it's not just about saving the animals. We're talking about saving the animals and the animals that have saved these soldiers in this particular, like it's, the impact on it is so significant and so valuable that there's no such thing as doing too much to maintain that and support that.
Yeah. And I think too, like if we highlight what we all know is well documented, like mental health awareness for veterans and how much we know animals in general help support that and help ease that. Like, why don't we make it easier for our servicemen and women to have the animals that they need to help protect them, keep them safe, keep them sane, keep them holistically feeling better while they're out there serving us? And then when they come home, I think that the service you are doing through the SPCAI is just so needed and so undervalued and underappreciated by the masses. I just feel like there should be billboards about this everywhere. The people need to know.
Thank you. You're both hired on our PR team now.
Sweet. SPCA has a new radio show.
Yeah, thank you. We try to get the word out as much as possible. It's always a challenge. And I think that this mission especially, we were hoping for that, but we were competing against the height of COVID. And of course, the presidential election.
Right.
Yeah,
there's been some other political
little
feedback around here. Right.
So
it's been a tough year for happy stories here in the United States.
Yeah, it's been hard.
And the other thing, and I feel really strongly about this, is changing the stigma of rescues into a positive. Like, I don't like the sadness. I am not a big fan of those commercials with the sad music and the hurt animals.
The animals in the cage.
Yeah, to me, it causes people to look away and makes them think that there's something broken with these animals, versus a soldier that was deployed, left his family or his girlfriend or his friend, like whatever it might be, deploys over there, finds a dog, finds a cat, that brings him some kind of positivity into his life, and then comes home with it. Like, the impact that is having is huge, and that should be where we're celebrating these stories. Like, this is really what should be on all, like, that story followed with, for only $1 a day, you can make a difference in a soldier.
Yes.
Like, that's where we should be going.
Yes. For the cost of a coffee.
Right.
Like, come on.
Can we do this again another time?
Yes. For less than the cost of one cup of coffee, you could reunite a soldier with their pet. I would be like, take my Starbucks for the day.
Sign up monthly, daily for that in a heartbeat.
Man, oh man.
Thank you. We do have a lot of feel-good stories, and we share them publicly with our supporters. We have an incredible donor base who really believe in our programs, especially this one. And you're right, Jason, there's always a fine line between the story you put out there and tugging at the heartstrings, but being also very careful that you're not going to turn somebody away, because it's, there's so many stories out there with social media. And
name one person that's ever been like, oh, I so look forward to hearing that song when it comes on the TV. Like, everybody's like, no, change that channel.
Like, so sad. All right, here's the deal. We've come to the end of our show.
Oh.
I cannot believe it. It has gone by so beyond fast. We have to have you back, Lori, and also I'm going to just stalk you for like the next month. So if you see someone in your bushes, just me, don't be scared. But we always end our show in a very special way, and you haven't had an opportunity to listen to one of our episodes yet, then you are in for a treat. So I will turn it over to my fabulous co-host Jason, who will lead you out with this little ditty.
Are you ready for your dog dad joke? See? This is the kind of audience I need every week.
We're ready.
How did the little Scottish dog feel when he saw a monster? He was terrified.
Oh my goodness. That was awesome. I had to hold back the snort.
I figured you did.
Just let it all out. That's what we're doing for all the snorts. Well, Lori, thank you for your amazing company and stories. And I cannot believe how quickly that went by.
Now that we have the introduction down, I think next time we should just we should do a whole podcast that could just be like, we've done Chernobyl. We could do like just these specific adventures and really dig into, I want to know more about the soldier program.
Yeah. And you're such a good storyteller.
Like that soldier in particular, and like how all of that went. Like I
feel like I'm there, and I'm like, the dome is there, and I'm looking at the moose, I'm very excited. So good. Thank you so much.
You're making my heart inflate, and thank you. I'm just going to say thank you.
Well, until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you so much for having me.
I just want to take a quick moment and thank our amazing guest today, Lori. And Jason, I guess thank you too for being here or whatever.
Sidekick, just show up from time to time.
Stop it. You're an amazing contributor. This show blew my mind. We can't wait to talk to Lori some more. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. Anything that we talked about, the websites, the projects that they've got going on, we'll link it in the show notes, and also at thedogdishpodcast.com. Make sure to check us out on social media. We are everywhere and anywhere. And if you're not already, come on, guys, hit that subscribe button. It's not hard. We want you to be here every week. We have more exciting guests coming. We can't even believe how amazing the support has been for our podcast.
And please reach out. If you've heard us talk about a topic in particular and you want us to expand even more on that little chunk that we had, we are more than happy to bring people back or find additional guests and keep growing that for you.
Yes, we want to hear from you, because this is your show for our wonderful dog moms and dog dads out there. Okay, so anyways, until next time, we'll see you, hear you, be here. We'll be here
next week.
Until then, bye.
Bye.